Welcome to News Talk with Simoni Vani at the International News Channel. Since the discovery of thousands of unmarked graves at former Indigenous residential schools, reconciliation efforts have been on the minds of Canadian citizens and politicians alike. In fact, this year, Canada celebrated its first official Day of Reconciliation. Countless politicians have joined in to express their sympathies and dedication to amending relations with the Indigenous people of Canada. Despite these outward expressions of support, the long-standing issue of Grassy Narrows has remained ignored. As a reminder to our viewers, in the 1960s, a paper mill released upwards of 9,000 kilos of mercury into the English and Wabigoon rivers. As a result, the Indigenous communities residing in the area who ingested fish from the rivers as well as water from the rivers have faced debilitating medical consequences. Despite the introduction of the English and Wabigoon Rivers Remediation Funding Act by the Wynne government in 2017, which was dedicated to providing $85 million to clean the mercury out of the rivers, the current Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, has failed to implement the mercury removal plan. Joining us to discuss this issue further is Darshan Maharaja. Darshan is a chartered accountant who worked in India, Africa, and the Middle East prior to moving to Canada. Since living in Canada, Darshan has become a political blogger, taking on writing about contemporary Canadian issues, and recently, Grassy Narrows has been at the center of Darshan's work. Thank you for joining us today, Darshan ji. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Firstly, would you like to tell our viewers, in your own words, what the Grassy Narrows tragedy is?
It's a 50-year-old tragedy, actually, and that's why it is of such a grave importance that more and more people push the government to do what's needed. It has several components. Right now I'm focusing on one part of it. What happened was in 1960s and early 1970s, a paper mill which is located about 150 kilometers upstream from Grassy Narrows released mercury, which they were using in their manufacturing process, into the rivers. And this became known by early 70s, and after even 50 years the mercury is still there. It has not been removed. And initially, because people didn't know, they were eating the fish that was contaminated with the mercury. So the mercury ended up in their own bodies, and mercury is a substance that once it enters a person's body, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It can even be transferred from mother to child via placenta. So it has a very serious health effect, debilitating you can call it.
Yeah.
Neurological conditions, and there is a whole group of medical issues that arise because of mercury in the body. Collectively they are known as Minamata disease.
Okay.
This is because initially it was noticed first in a place called Minamata in Japan, and the health issue is one, providing the medical care facility there, which is federal jurisdiction, is another, and then cleanup of the river all the way from the mill, which is still functioning, all the way to Grassy Narrows, and there are 3 or 4 other First Nations reserves there. Cleaning up all that water is very important. It's, in my personal opinion, a matter of international shame for Canada that, you know, being such a prosperous country, we haven't been able to deal with this for 50 years. So I just decided to focus on one particular part of it, which is just cleaning up the rivers, which is provincial jurisdiction.
Yeah. So there hasn't been any progress on removing mercury at Grassy Narrows, or some?
None at all. Now, what happened was in 2017, the Liberal government of the time in Ontario set up $85 million in funds, as you said.
Yeah.
And then a panel was constituted, which included not just people from the government, but also from the First Nations communities in that area, including Grassy Narrows and 4 others.
Yeah.
So the work is supposed to have begun in 2018, but the minister tabled the latest report yesterday in the parliament, and they are still collecting samples 3 years later.
So you've clearly done a lot of research and you've written about it a lot too. So what about this story spoke out to you first?
It's a humanitarian tragedy.
Yeah.
And if you think of any other similar industrial accidents or pollution caused by industry, the record, if you check, of each incident and how it was then attended to, this I think qualifies as the worst, and that hurts me as a Canadian.
Yeah.
Because we are not just a prosperous country, but we are also a proud country. And we want to address any issues that may arise. Preferably they should not arise, but if they do, then it should be attended to in a reasonable time frame. 50 years is by no means a reasonable time frame.
It's quite a lot.
So that's what hit me.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't know much about it. One point while writing a blog, I realized that I don't know anything beyond the headlines. And then when I dug into it, I realized that there is this $85 million fund. So I decided to find out what's happening, how much progress has been made. But as of yesterday, it's clear that no progress has been made in removing the mercury.
So why do you think that the Ford government has failed to implement that plan, that $1 million plan? For that?
$85 million, right? It's more than $1 million question that you are asking.
Millions of dollars, yeah.
The answer is in 3 parts.
Okay.
And you have to arrive at your own conclusions because there is no clear information. So it may be partly speculative on my part. But it seems clear that first of all, they have no priority of attending to this. Now the reason why I reached this conclusion is because the latest report, which was tabled yesterday, that is 8th of November, it was submitted by the panel on 1st of June. So there is no urgency to table this and move it forward. They do it whenever they can get around to it. So that is lack of priority is the first part of this. Second part is that even the opposition parties have not taken it up with the government. They have not held the government to account. I have been in contact with all the opposition parties, including the official opposition, NDP, the leader Andrea Horwath and deputy leader Sarah Singh, and the MPP of NDP from that area where Grassy Narrows is located in his riding, who also happens to be a First Nations. And the only reply I got from him was that they will take it up with the government or with the ministry. After that, there is no follow-up. And the leader of NDP, Andrea Horwath, she has not replied at all to any of my emails or messages. Deputy leader Sarah Singh, to her credit, she has replied a couple of times. First time she said they'll just get in touch with the ministry. And then after a lot of pushing from my end, she has set up a meeting for tomorrow, that's 10th of November. So I'm supposed to meet her. We'll see what happens. But I'll try and push the opposition to take this up in the House, asking why this has not started yet. They are still collecting samples after 3 years. So that is part 2 of my answer. Part 3 is that this is not on the radar of the voters or the people, broadly speaking. Even I didn't know, so I'm not placing a blame on anyone. You can say the media is also responsible for part of this because they don't speak about it often enough. And because there is no public pressure, no politician feels compelled to act. Ideally, they should act on their own, but because there is no pressure, even that factor disappears. That's why there has been no action on this so far.
So how do you think your meeting tomorrow is going to go in that sense then?
Well, I'm hopeful. I always remain hopeful. If she has agreed to a meeting, it was initially set up for 1 week prior. But then there was a scheduling conflict at her end, so it was rescheduled. I'm hopeful that once I talk to her why this is important and why this needs to be done, then she'll take it up with the government.
Okay, fair enough. So you did mention all of the health effects of the mercury contamination, but it's been going on for 50 years. So what do you think is going on, or for the people that are living there now, what are the impacts of this mercury today?
The impact of this goes way beyond just health, although health is all important. What happened was they had built up a very nice economy around fishing and tourism. It's a beautiful place otherwise. So there was a thriving economy there based on fishing and tourism. And once this mercury issue became known, it collapsed. So roughly 90 to 95% of the people lost their livelihood there. And nothing has replaced it because the mercury is still there. You can't have people going there or you can't have any activity there. So economic impact is crippling. Then the health impact of course is there. I'll give you just one example. I read
please.
about one young person there. He has a disability that if he is standing at any moment he can fall down, because his brain has been affected so much that it cannot maintain his balance. So these are the kinds of things that people are being born with, kids are being born with, all these disabilities. So that has been completely devastating for the people of the entire area. As I said, there are 5 First Nations reserves there. Grassy Narrows is the main one, so we know it by that name. But even the other 4 have had this impact on their lives.
Speaking about the cleanup itself, do you think that the English and Wabigoon Rivers Remediation Funding Act, if implemented, will be enough to resolve the issues that these indigenous communities are facing?
It will resolve the issues partly.
Okay.
Because there is, as I said, there are 3 components of this. Now, one of the components is that, and this came to light much later, I think in 2014 or 2015, when a worker who had been employed in that factory revealed that he had been asked to bury some barrels filled with mercury on the premises of the factory. So this happened in I think 1974 or thereabouts, and this came out in 2014. So in spite of all the precautions having been taken, like putting vinyl sheets underneath, etc., the mercury is leaching into the ground from the drums. It's been long enough, more than 40 years. Now we are closing in on 50 years. So the mercury is leaching into the ground, and from there via groundwater it is making its way into the rivers. So even if you remove all the mercury from the rivers themselves, there is new mercury coming in. So that also has to be done. Now my understanding is that that project is a responsibility of the company that is running the factory now. Now the company has also, the factory has changed hands multiple times, but the current owner is responsible for that project. And initially the information I got from the ministry was that their studies are going to be over in summer and that a report should be out in fall. Now we are in fall. Once we are nearing the end of fall, I'll start asking
again
where that report
absolutely. Yeah, I think follow-up is like the best way to attack this for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. But in your opinion, what needs to be done in order to ensure that the indigenous people who fell victim to the pollutants in the rivers receive justice?
Well, the first thing, of course, is to remove the mercury. And I spoke to a toxicologist. In fact, this happens to be his specialization. He has done PhD from the US and he teaches toxicology now at one of the Canadian universities. I spoke to him and he said that there is no way this should have gone 3 years for just collecting samples. Samples collection in a 130 kilometer stretch of river and adjacent areas should have been done much earlier than that. So in order to give justice to the people at Grassy Narrows and surrounding areas, the first thing to do is to start removing the mercury from the rivers, and at the same time follow up vigorously with the company that is running the factory now, so that that part of the mercury which is leaching into the rivers, that is also stopped. The federal government had announced a plan for making a medical care center there. Construction is supposed to begin in 2022, but earlier it was supposed to have begun in 2019. So this is another issue that keeps getting pushed down the road. Initially it was announced for about $19 million. The people there were not happy. Then a fresh agreement was struck, so the total funding now is 88 million. But if they start in 2022, the question is when they will finish the construction. And after that, running that medical center is provincial responsibility. So there will need to be coordination. Premier Ford, in the only reply that he gave to me, He said that these are multi-jurisdictional issues. Well, we know they are, and it's not a revelation that they are multi-jurisdictional. You knew it going in.
Yeah.
So in 3 years, you should have sorted them out.
Yep.
The same multi-jurisdictional issues will crop up once the medical care center is completed, the construction is completed. Because again, the province will have to organize for it to be run on a
Yeah.
regular basis. Presently, Grassy Narrows gets a doctor for 2 days every month. The doctor goes from Kenora, which is like about 200 kilometers from Grassy Narrows, and 2 days a month is absolutely nowhere near enough.
No.
But I can see the difficulty, because if you are a doctor and if you have to stay there permanently, then you need to reorganize your entire life.
Yeah.
So they have to start working on that now, how they are going to organize for nurses and doctors and all the other attending staff to be there on a permanent basis. That's the way to deliver justice to the people at
Yeah.
Grassy Narrows.
With any kind of luck, though, the provincial and federal government will need to be on the same page about how this is going to operate. Are you optimistic about that? That it will fall into place faster than we think?
Well, I believe in being optimistic, but being optimistic doesn't mean having a hands-off approach.
Okay.
I think more and more voters and more Ontarians need to start following up with their elected representatives, so that there is enough pressure for them to coordinate with each other and get the job done.
Yeah. What other things do you think Canadians can do to demand this issue receive more attention?
Well, anyone who has access to media should go to media. I've been lucky. My message has been accepted by one radio station and one major newspaper. So I was on radio giving voice to this
and
issue.
your Toronto Star article, right?
Yes.
That was absolutely a wonderful read.
Yes. I mean, it was a moment for me, because I knew that now more people are going to be aware of what's happening or not happening there. So if everybody keeps pushing with whatever resources they have, whatever access they have, I'm sure this can be resolved.
Yeah.
The toxicologist that I talked to, he said, this can be done in maybe a couple of years.
Okay.
Now, even if you discount that opinion, although you shouldn't, because it's a professional opinion, in 5 years at least it should be done.
Yeah. Yeah. 5 years is still a good timeline.
Yes.
Still a fair enough timeline.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Darshanji.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. This is Simoni Vani, and you're watching the International News Channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to keep up to date on all of the latest content.